Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. The big Hearthstone balance patch was a couple of days ago, and now we have the first data on what the new meta really looks like. The data is still a little bit sketchy, especially when it comes to specific matchups, like, hey, which deck is really favored, how much favored, or are they closer to even. But I can quite confidently place at least the decks in some kind of an order on like which deck is generally better than another deck. And in this video I have a record 17 decks featured, all of which should be able to climb the ladder. Although, like, I think the top 10 is probably what I would truly recommend, but there are some fun decks also in the lower ranks. So let's get started. At number 17 we have Undead Priest, and the buffs to Undead Priest have not changed the overall concept. You still want to play the strong 3-drops, and then you want to resurrect those. But what is interesting is that the current sample, it looks like Haunting Nightmare could actually be stronger than Scourge Rager. So Haunting Nightmare is replacing Scourge Rager in this list. The two lists, like this list had a sample size of like what, 600 games, and the other one was like 700 games, something like that. So obviously they could still be reversed. The sample sizes are low enough that everything could still go the other way around. But it's interesting that the early data indicates that Haunting Nightmare could actually be playable in this list. So if you want to try Undead Priest, you might consider trying it with Haunting Nightmare. Then there's Enrage Warrior. Enrage Warrior is still doing quite alright. Actually, overall statistic of the archetype looks pretty strong in comparison. But what Enrage Warrior list would you like to play? The samples are tiny, and this is pretty much the only version that has a decent sample. Last time I made a video like this a couple of weeks ago, I featured the non-March of the Lich King Enrage Warrior. It seemed to be doing better than this version that includes March of the Lich King cards. However, I just cannot confidently say which one is better, but if you have only the old cards and you don't have any much of the Lich King stuff, you can also try to play the old version of Enrage Warrior. And at number 15 we have Aggro Druid. Aggro Druid is back on the menu, boys, and yeah, the Lingering Zombie version is the superior version of Aggro Druid, it seems. But overall, there's a couple of different versions, you can play any of them, and Aggro Druid, the cheapest playable deck in the game. Like, this deck has 10 rare cards and the rest are commons, something like that, so very cheap and it is capable. At number 14 we have a newcomer, Unholy Death Knight, featured for the first time ever. Well, Unholy Death Knight got some buffs, but the buffs mostly were like Battlefield Necromancer, and Battlefield Necromancer is now the strongest card in this deck. The buff was totally bonkers. Battlefield Necromancer is so good. However, you still have the problem of having good 1-drops, which you kind of don't. So even though you now have Battlefield Necromancer, so if you happen to roll a Bodybagger on turn 1, and you can continue from that Bodybagger to the Necromancer on turn 2 and have a corpse, yeah, you're doing great. But if you can't find a good 1-drop, then you're not doing so well. And that actually really makes me wonder whether that Battlefield Necromancer buff was a major mistake, because now Battlefield Necromancer is super strong whenever you have a good 1-drop to go before that. And you still don't have good 1-drops, so it's just kind of holding Unholy Death Knight back. And if they buff 1-drops so that Unholy Death Knight will have good 1-drops, then that Battlefield Necromancer becomes totally insane. And yeah, so problems here, problems there. But either way, Unholy Death Knight showing some signs of life now. But still not as many signs of life as Frost Death Knight. Frost Death Knight was nerfed, Glacial Advance is now a little bit weaker, the list has not changed by a single card, the best Frost Death Knight list is still the exact same list, it's just a little bit weaker now than it used to be. But on the other hand, meta has changed so that there are some matchups like Curse Imp Warlock that Frost Death Knight is actually pretty good against, so Frost Death Knight enjoys some of the aspects of the new meta, but overall it's still slightly weaker deck and somewhat viable but not great. Then there's Face Hunter. I was thinking the Face Hunter might become the top Hunter deck, but now as the sample size is growing, the performance of Face Hunter is going down, and it looks like Face Hunter is actually the weakest of the 3 Hunter archetypes, so Beast Hunter and Shockspitter Hunter are both better than Face Hunter. Other than that, the list is still exactly the same as it was before the balance patch, and we'll see. As we get more data, we'll see what happens with this deck, but it's definitely a playable deck. Although it looks like Shockspitter Hunter might be slightly superior. Now, after the balance patch, this Shockspitter Hunter list with the Harpoon Gun and with Doggy Biscuits seems to be better than the competitor, which had the minion that makes an enemy minion have 1 health when you hit into it. So, right now I would play this list if I really wanted to play with Shockspitters, and it is kind of amazing that the 4-cost Shockspitter still remains playable. As we get to top 10, we get to decks that are really starting to do well in this meta, and number 10 is Aggro Mage. Aggro Mage has a couple of really good, strong matchups. Imp Warlock, Pure Paladin, very good matchups to have as a powerful matchup for your deck, but still Aggro Mage is weaker than the other mage archetype, which is the big Spell Mage. I could no longer find data on Ping Mage. Ping Mage was like sort of making a comeback to the meta on day 1, and I do wonder how strong it would be, but there's no longer data about it. People just aren't experimenting with that enough. So right now, Aggro Mage it is. And at number 9 we have Control Paladin, still the exact same list as before the balance patch. Its matchup spread has been a little weaker now than it was before, but it's still a capable deck. And at number 8 we have Big Spell Mage. Big Spell Mage came in big on the first day after the balance patch. After that it has leveled off a little bit, but Big Spell Mage is still a good deck. Exactly the same list, this one as well as it was before the balance patch. And at number 7 we have Beast Hunter, the best hunter archetype once again, overtaking Shockspitter, which was nerfed. The Beast Hunter list, currently the list with 2 copies of collateral damage, is doing a little bit better than the list with Lothemar. I was expecting other cards to replace Lothemar, but well, collateral damage seems to be the popular option, at least for the time being. We're still living in a world with fairly small sample sizes. But other than that, Beast Hunter, of course, a solid deck that you can always take on the ladder and succeed. And at number 6 we have Evolve Shaman. It's still Jumper's list with Neptune Tidehunter and Shadowhunter Vol'jin. Also the Sea Giant list sees a lot of play. Sea Giant list initially on the first day after the patch looked stronger than the Neptune list, but the meta has been changing since then. Not so many tokens, Sea Giant becoming a little bit weaker again, and Neptune and Vol'jin becoming the stronger version of Evolve Shaman. And funnily enough, Warlock really benefited from the nerfs and buffs, even though the Warlock buffs actually were the cards that don't see any play. But Imp Warlock coming in at number 5, strong, aggressive, self-sufficient. It's just a fun little deck. Don't play with the Denaturus version. Denaturus really doesn't belong in this meta, but this one with the Astral Blood Sword seems to be doing well. And on the subject of Imp Warlocks, the better Imp Warlock is the Curse variant of Imp Warlock, which had its side Denaturus long ago. And yeah, those curses, they're back. They're here again. And at number 3 we have Spell Demon Hunter. Quest Demon Hunter died with the nerfs. The quest is dead, you cannot play with the quest anymore. But hey, you can just drop the quest, bring Jace Darkweaver back into the game, bring Artificer Cymox back into the game, and you suddenly have a competitive deck. And this one is doing surprisingly well. We'll see if it's going to last, but Spell Demon Hunter's success has really been something that surprised me a little. And I guess the same can be said about Pure Paladin. Obviously Pure Paladin was one of the candidates for Rising, and Pure Paladin, this kind of version with Buffet Beacons, Hold the Bridge, seems to be doing better than the other version. Hold the Bridge is one of the weaker cards, but replacing it with one of the cards that are otherwise commonly used in Pure Paladin seems to just make the deck worse. So this is currently the best performing version. And finally, the best deck in the game, maybe Miracle Rogue. How about that? Maestro is gone and Gnolls are gone. The performance of the Maestro Gnoll list is abysmal right now. We're talking about 30% win rate, so that just completely died. There is no way to be playing with Maestro and with the Gnolls, but you can still play with concoctions. Blizzard didn't nerf the concoctions. I expected a nerf to Potion Belt, because concoctions are just insanely powerful. But then again, without the Gnolls, I still thought that okay, even with the concoctions there should be aggro decks that can challenge this. But I'm not sure if there are. And Miracle Rogue is a great example of how difficult it can be to track the performance of the decks in this meta this early, because people are still playing a lot with very bad versions of Miracle Rogue, and overall the Miracle Rogue win rate is not that high. But then when you start to look deeper into, okay, what are specific decks and what's the performance of those specific decks, and then you start to see that, okay, once you take Maestro out, once you take the Nulls out, actually the Concoction, Headwind, Necrolord, Draka, Sinstone Graveyard, that core is still a perfectly capable deck. It's not as impervious as it used to be. It's not unbeatable by any means. We still don't have proper data so that I could tell you exactly the matchups, but Miracle Rogue is doing very, very well when you play the right version. If you play the wrong version, then you're just dead. But we'll see how it goes further on as the meta starts to stabilize. I also really would like to see some more innovation, because like there's a list of 17 decks, and of those 17 decks, 13 were already in some form anyway present in the previous list. Obviously, Miracle Rogue was then with Maestro, now without Maestro. The Spell Demon Hunter was with the quest, now it's without the quest. So there are significant differences in some of the lists, but the basic ideas in many ways are still the same. But we'll see if any strong new candidates can rise. I'm really looking forward, for example, more data about that Ping Mage, because it looked really promising early on, but now there's no data to be found. And I think there could be a number of other new potential contenders, but probably not Control Warrior. It doesn't look like the buffs did anything for Control Warrior. I don't expect that one to rise. So yeah, now we're starting to see like, okay, what happened with the old decks, and with the nerf decks, which cards are now unplayable and have to be removed from the decks, and then how do those decks do without those cards. And next, hopefully we'll start to see, okay, what are the power rankings between all of these decks, and whether there is something that a new deck could exploit and hopefully rise to the list. So there's still plenty of Hearthstone to be played in this patch, even though I'm currently ranking Miracle Rogue as #1, but the ranking of #1 is not quite as strong as it was before the patch. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.